Your soulmate's divorce hearing took an unexpected turn. Open this now. My beloved child, stop for one quiet moment, because there are moments in life that appear ordinary from the outside, yet beneath the surface they quietly rewrite an entire future. This is one of those moments. Somewhere, while clocks continued to tick and people carried on with their routines, a conversation unfolded that no one expected. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Yet what happened changed the direction of a story that had seemed frozen for far too long. Listen carefully, because every detail matters. Someone connected to your future walked into a place believing they already knew how the day would end. Every document seemed prepared. Every answer felt predictable. Every face around them carried the expression of people who had witnessed similar endings countless times before. It looked like another page ready to be turned. But destiny has an unusual habit. Just when everything appeared settled, something invisible shifted. Have you ever noticed how one unexpected sentence can completely transform the meaning of an entire conversation? What if a single realization, arriving at exactly the right second, could redirect years of emotional weight? Hold on to that thought, because this story isn't about legal papers or final decisions. It is about awakening. It is about truth finally becoming impossible to ignore. There was a silence. Not an uncomfortable silence. A meaningful one. The kind that arrives when someone's heart suddenly recognizes something their mind had been avoiding for far too long. No one around them could explain why the atmosphere felt different. Nothing visible had changed. Yet inside, everything had begun moving. Sometimes life doesn't announce its greatest turning points with noise. Sometimes it whispers. And only those paying close attention recognize that history has quietly begun changing. Stay with this message a little longer, because what follows connects directly to you in ways you may not expect. For a long time, this person believed they were walking toward one destination. Every choice they made seemed to reinforce that path. Every step appeared permanent. But beneath all those decisions, another current had already started pulling them toward something completely different. Can you feel it? That strange sensation when life refuses to follow the script everyone assumed had already been written? That is exactly what unfolded. The unexpected turn wasn't created by coincidence. It came from clarity. A clarity that arrived without warning. In one brief instant, old assumptions began losing their power. Thoughts that once felt certain suddenly became questions. Questions became reflections. Reflections became quiet truths. And those truths refused to disappear. Imagine standing before a doorway you've passed hundreds of times, only to realize today it leads somewhere entirely different than you always believed. That is the kind of realization taking shape. This isn't about looking backward. It is about finally seeing forward. Because sometimes the greatest obstacle isn't another person. It is believing yesterday still controls tomorrow. As this awareness continued growing, emotions once buried beneath routine began rising to the surface. Memories carried new meaning. Conversations from months, or even years, started fitting together like pieces of a puzzle that had always belonged to the same picture. Nothing about this felt random anymore. Every delay suddenly carried purpose. Every unanswered question started revealing its hidden lesson. Pause here for just a heartbeat. What if the chapter you thought had already ended was never truly the final chapter at all? What if it was only preparing space for the story that actually belongs to you? Don't rush past that idea. Because many people spend their entire lives chasing signs while overlooking the quiet transformations happening directly in front of them. Today feels different. Not because the world changed overnight. Because perspective did. And perspective has the power to change everything. The person at the center of this unfolding story is beginning to understand something remarkable: peace cannot be built on pretending. Futures cannot grow where hearts remain divided between who they were and who they are becoming. That realization became impossible to ignore. Even those observing from a distance sensed something had shifted. No dramatic announcement. No impossible miracle. Only the unmistakable feeling that destiny had quietly stepped into the room. If you've remained here until this moment, ask yourself one honest question. Why did this message find you today? Perhaps because some stories arrive exactly when they're needed, not to predict your future, but to remind you that unexpected turns often lead to the paths we were always meant to discover. And this is only the beginning. Because what happened immediately after that unexpected turn revealed something no one saw coming. Wait just a little longer. The next chapter uncovers why this single moment became impossible for anyone involved to forget, and why your connection to this unfolding story is far deeper than it first appears. Look closer, because what happened after that quiet turning point surprised even the people who believed they had already seen every possible outcome. The room hadn't changed. The voices were the same. The surroundings looked familiar. Yet the energy felt completely different, as though an invisible page had been turned while no one was watching. Sometimes the greatest changes don't arrive with celebration. They arrive with understanding. The person at the center of this story found themselves reflecting instead of reacting. For the first time in a very long while, they weren't thinking about proving a point or winning an argument. They were asking a different question altogether. What kind of future truly feels like home? That single thought echoed louder than every conversation that had come before it. Have you ever noticed how life slows down just before revealing something important? Seconds begin to feel longer. Small details suddenly stand out. Even ordinary moments seem filled with meaning. That is exactly where this story now unfolds. Stay with this message, because another layer is about to reveal itself. As they gathered their thoughts, unexpected memories surfaced, not the painful ones they had carried for years, but the moments that reminded them who they really were before disappointment clouded their vision. It was as though the future had reached backward, gently collecting every forgotten piece of hope. And then something remarkable happened. Instead of focusing on what had been lost, they began noticing what was finally becoming possible. That shift changed everything. Because when your attention changes, your direction changes. What once looked like an ending slowly transformed into an open road stretching farther than they had ever imagined. The strange part? No one else could fully understand why their expression had softened. Others saw the same situation through the lens of yesterday. But this person had quietly begun looking through the lens of tomorrow. That is a powerful difference. Many people wait for life to become easier before allowing themselves to feel hopeful. But true transformation often begins the moment hope appears first. Perhaps that is why this message found you today. Not to tell you exactly what will happen, but to remind you that unexpected turns often carry unexpected opportunities. Think about your own path for a moment. How many events once felt disappointing, only to reveal hidden blessings months later? How many closed doors quietly redirected you toward experiences you would never trade today? Life has a remarkable way of connecting dots we cannot yet see. The person in this story was beginning to recognize that truth. Every delay had shaped resilience. Every unanswered question had sharpened wisdom. Every uncertain season had prepared them for clarity. Nothing had been wasted. And neither has anything in your own journey. Before we continue, if this story has stirred something inside you, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes hearing another perspective creates a connection someone else truly needs. And if these stories help you reflect on your own path, subscribing simply means we'll continue exploring these meaningful journeys together. Now, let your attention return. Because another realization was quietly unfolding. For the first time, they stopped asking, "Why did this happen to me?" Instead, they wondered, "What is this preparing me for?" Those two questions sound similar, but they lead to completely different futures. One keeps you looking backward. The other invites you forward. That invisible change became impossible to ignore. Even people nearby sensed a calm confidence replacing uncertainty. There was no dramatic announcement, no sudden celebration. Just the unmistakable feeling that someone had stepped into a new chapter without needing permission from the past. And here's the fascinating part. This story isn't asking you to believe in coincidence. It's asking you to pay attention. Because sometimes the most meaningful signs aren't loud enough to interrupt your day. They're only quiet enough to reward those willing to listen. If you've stayed until this moment, then don't lose your focus now. The next chapter reveals why a conversation that happened immediately afterward left everyone reflecting long after the day had ended, and how one unexpected message became the piece that finally connected everything together. Wait, because the next few moments are where the story takes a direction almost no one could have anticipated. The unexpected turn was never meant to be the destination. It was only the doorway. What happened afterward carried a deeper meaning. One that continued unfolding long after everyone believed the day had already reached its conclusion. Picture this for a moment. The conversations had quieted. The busy atmosphere slowly faded. People began leaving, convinced they had witnessed the entire story. But they hadn't. The most meaningful chapter was only beginning. Somewhere between silence and reflection, your soulmate found themselves standing alone with their own thoughts. There were no outside opinions left to influence them. No distractions demanding immediate attention. Just a rare moment of honesty, the kind that arrives only when life temporarily removes all the noise. And honesty has an extraordinary power. It doesn't force answers. It reveals them. For what felt like the first time in years, they stopped thinking about appearances and started thinking about purpose. What kind of life do I truly want to build from this moment forward? That question refused to leave. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. A single thought that quietly follows you throughout the day. A realization that keeps returning, no matter how many times you try to focus elsewhere. Those thoughts often appear for a reason. Not to disturb your peace, but to guide it. Stay with this story, because another piece is about to fall into place. As the hours passed, familiar memories began resurfacing. Not as regrets, but as lessons. Faces once associated with confusion now represented growth. Conversations that had once seemed unfinished suddenly made perfect sense. It was almost as if life had been preparing this understanding all along. Isn't that fascinating? Sometimes clarity doesn't arrive because new information appears. It arrives because we finally see old information through new eyes. That was the real turning point. Not an event. Not a decision. A perspective. And perspective quietly reshapes every future it touches. Then something even more unexpected happened. Instead of feeling weighed down by uncertainty, your soulmate experienced something they hadn't felt in a very long time. Relief. Not because every question had already been answered, but because they finally trusted that the answers would arrive exactly when they were meant to. There is a peaceful confidence that comes from no longer trying to control every outcome. That confidence began growing stronger with every passing moment. Imagine standing at the edge of a road covered in morning fog. You cannot see the entire journey. You only see the next few steps. Yet somehow, those few steps are enough. Life often works that way. The entire future doesn't need to become visible before the next chapter can begin. Only the next step does. Maybe that's why this message reached you today. Not to convince you that every mystery has already been solved, but to remind you that meaningful change often begins long before its results become visible. Now think carefully. What if this unexpected turn wasn't separating lives, but quietly creating space for healthier beginnings? What if what seemed uncertain was actually becoming more authentic with every passing day? Questions like these don't demand immediate answers. They invite reflection. And reflection changes people in ways that force never can. As evening approached, one final realization settled in. The future cannot be built by repeating yesterday. It must be created through choices made with greater awareness today. That understanding brought an unmistakable calm. The rush disappeared. The fear faded. The need to force outcomes quietly dissolved. In its place came patience. And patience has a remarkable way of revealing opportunities that urgency never notices. If you've remained here until now, don't leave just yet. Because the next part uncovers an unexpected message that arrived after everything seemed over, a message that caused your soulmate to pause, smile quietly, and look toward the future with completely different eyes. Sometimes the smallest message carries the greatest meaning. And the one waiting ahead may explain why today's unexpected turn was never an ending at all, but the beginning of a story that had been quietly finding its way to the right moment all along. Pause, Because just when it seemed there was nothing left to discover, an unexpected message appeared, quiet, simple, and impossible to ignore. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't demand attention. Yet the moment your soulmate read it, everything they had been reflecting on suddenly connected like the final piece of a puzzle. Some messages change your schedule. Others change your perspective. This one changed both. For several long moments, they simply stared at the words. Not because they were confusing, but because they felt strangely familiar. It was as though life had been repeating the same lesson through different experiences, patiently waiting for the moment they were finally ready to understand it. Have you ever experienced that feeling? When something you've heard before suddenly carries an entirely new meaning? That's what happened. The message didn't tell them what to do. It reminded them who they had become. And that reminder was more powerful than any outside advice. Stay with this story, because what came next explains why this unexpected turn continues to matter long after that day ended. Instead of rushing into another decision, your soulmate chose something different. They paused. They observed. They listened, not to the noise around them, but to the quiet confidence growing within. That confidence wasn't based on certainty. It was built on wisdom. They realized that some chapters must close naturally before the next one can truly begin. Trying to force tomorrow while still carrying yesterday only creates more confusion. So they released the need to predict every outcome. And the moment they did, life felt lighter. It was as though an invisible weight had quietly disappeared. The future no longer looked like something to fear. It looked like something to discover. What if that's the real purpose of unexpected turns? Not to interrupt your journey, but to redirect it toward a path you couldn't have imagined before. Think about your own story. How many meaningful moments arrived only after plans changed? How many opportunities appeared because life refused to follow the timeline you expected? Perhaps delays are not empty spaces. Perhaps they are preparation. As this realization settled in, your soulmate noticed something remarkable. Hope had returned. Not the kind that depends on perfect circumstances. The kind that grows because someone finally believes their next chapter can be different from the last. That quiet hope became the foundation for every step that followed. And maybe, just maybe, this message is encouraging you to recognize that same possibility within your own life. If this story has stayed with you until now, thank you for being part of this journey. If it sparked a meaningful thought, sharing it in the comments may encourage someone else who's on a similar path. And if you enjoy stories that explore destiny, growth, and unexpected turning points, subscribing simply means we'll continue exploring them together. But don't leave yet. Because one final piece remains. There was one conversation that had not happened. One question that had not yet been asked. One answer waiting quietly in the future. Your soulmate didn't know exactly when it would arrive. They only knew they would recognize it when the moment came. Sometimes the greatest sign isn't a loud announcement. It's the calm certainty that you're finally walking in the right direction. And that certainty stayed with them as they stepped into a brand new chapter, one no longer defined by the past, but shaped by hope, clarity, and the courage to embrace what comes next. The final chapter of this story reveals why that quiet confidence became the beginning of something truly unforgettable, and why the most meaningful surprise was still waiting just beyond the horizon.